Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Academy of Social Sporting Excellence. And this is going to be a dialogue on the impact of technology on grassroots and high performance sports. Our key themes this evening are accessibility, civic pride, and sustainability. We are committed to creating a sports ecosystem that excels in athletic performance. We work with local partners to promote inclusive neighbourhoods and local communities. So to start off our dialogue, I'm really pleased that the founder of the Academy of Sporting Excellence, Dr. Michael Bruce. Good evening,
Good evening.
Michael.
Good evening. How are you?
Great. And
Good,
the
good.
floor is yours.
Thank you. So in terms of the development of ACE, Academy of Sporting Excellence, this started about 4 decades ago. The reality is I was involved in sports from a very young age. So I always had a love for the sports. In fact, I really wanted to at school, when we had a careers evening, I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to give back. I always felt there was something I needed to do. That was a passion for me. So moved on from there. I played cricket for Middlesex as a wicketkeeper. I then progressed. I was one of these children that at that stage was good at many different things, many different sports. So then went to football, then it went to track and field. Ended up running for England. Moving on to coaching Olympic and world champions. Then moving into football, working with a number of top Premiership stars currently. But actually moving back a bit, what I found was that even as an athlete, I somehow felt that I never achieved what I should have or could have. And so I always had an inquisitive mind around being the best and elite performance and, what does that look like? And so I started about traveling, when you run for England and et cetera, in football, traveling, asking questions and saying, right, well, how can I better performance? Did a lot of research. Then every one of my sons played football. The first was at Tottenham, the second at Chelsea, the third at Arsenal. But in fact, it was with the third son that actually he was at one academy, and the academy and he got released. That was age 9. And so the academy director, I inquired, I said, well, why are you not signing him? And he said, look, he's not going to be a footballer. And that's it. So I sort of felt that, well, at 9, how can you work out that he's not going to be a footballer? And he pretty much said to me, well, if you think you can do better, go and do it yourself. So I took up the challenge. And so, my thing to him was, well, do you know who I am? And I didn't mean that in an arrogant, way. Well, do you know what I do? And that sort of thing. And he pretty much said, well, I don't really care. So look, I went back and that gave me a passion and the will to do it. It's not great seeing your 9-year-old cry for 3 hours all the way from South London back to North London. And so I just felt that, well, no, there is something. And that's how the academy was born. We started to, I started to research, look into stuff, and then the results came very quickly, because what I then did, I fused the best of track and field athletics, everything I knew, with football and developing programs. And look, the program has changed so long, over so many years in so many different ways. And the one thing I came up in football was that, well, it's all about opinions. It's all about opinions. My thing was always, well, it's all about the truth. And the reality is I've seen many, many footballers that should be playing the game, not playing the game because it's all about opinions. So I set about designing a methodical process where never again would a club say to me, it's all about opinions. Because through data, I could prove that, well, actually, it's not about opinions. It's about the fact any other industry would focus primarily on facts as it relates to the specifics of the relevant industry. And so the earliest form of the evolution labs was born. But we always had in mind, I always had in mind that, you know, the focus would be on development, on elite development. You know, methodically measuring it, producing the facts and saying, well, there must be a better way than someone waking up one day, not in a bad mood, saying, well, you know what, I can't be bothered. Well, no, that play's no good. And so we set about mathematically measuring, you know, having tangible measures to the place we are now, where, you know, it will be, and it currently is at this point, the world's first predictive process in terms of player ratings, talent identification, you know, recruitment, elite development on every single level, the very first predictive model. And so, so effectively, that's where we are. How the system works primarily is, what we would do is we would, through a series of, where are we? Through a series of measures and tests and assessments, we would look at, from a diagnostic point of view, that would be the first stage of the recruitment and development process. We would perform a diagnostic where at that point there would be 12 to 15 data points. We would collect the data, you know, it's all measurable, put it in the system. The system would then give us a predictive in terms of what the likelihood of the likely program should be. So, for example, key to that would be, we have 5 key areas: technical, athletic, psychological, educational, and social. And those measures really have come from a combination and a collection of all of the top academies in the world, whether it be Arsenal, Chelsea, whatever, Real Madrid, whatever they were, the data was collected, and we moved on from there. So we've got the best of every one of those clubs and organizations. And so we fused it based on trial and error, etc. And I guess the very first successes that were of that would have been with a young lady I coached called Chioma Juma from Nigeria, who was the very first Olympic gold medalist for Nigeria. 96 Olympic Games, you know, trialing it then. And so that was sort of the very first test, as it were, of it. Then it was developed further from there. So effectively, it's measured and quartered from a macro and micro level around the technical. So from the athletic point of view, from the football point of view, what we've done, we've said, right, so let's not focus on the technical side, let's look at the athletic side. And so, because the reality is that a football coach is a football coach is a football coach. And so it's really, that's one of the areas where we don't really need to reinvent the wheel. But of course, the area or areas that we could add value to elite performance would have been around the athletic piece and the psychology piece. Because again, educational, social, again, were constant. And so, excuse me, we set about looking at that. So the athletics piece of it focused on, again, simply strength, agility, speed, each with different micro data points under that, and the psychology would have been the same. Now, if I move forward to the psychology, again, we're one of very, very few, probably one of 3 in the world who've got a predictive process and measurement for that, because historically that has been very, very difficult to measure. But over the years of research, working with a number of the players in the Premiership now that we work with, you know, we're confident that we've got a predictive model in place for that. But moving back to the to the athletic piece of that, then we would then look at the strength, agility, speed, break it down. The measures would be around 4 traffic light systems, so red, amber, green, and blue. So red meaning if you ragged through points, a points process system based on your data points and assessment. If you rag as a red, let's say, for example, it's 25 points, you will get 25 points. You would be ragged at a red light. Effectively, that would mean that you would be released, or, you know, you wouldn't be, I won't say good enough, but you won't be in place. That would be really redevelopment. Let's say, for example, it's 50, you score. That would be amber, so that would be development. So you go straight into a development program. If it was 75, you scored, that would be a green, which means you would move forward to a trial. If it were blue, which is rare, it means that would be 100%, but let's use that number for now, which means you would move on from a trial, go straight to signing. So we needed the clubs, for example, to be confident enough to take that up, because obviously, if I'm a football club, I'm not going to take your word that the players are blue lights, etc., etc. And so that's kind of a basic and an overview of what it's about and where we are. Clearly more detailed than that, but at this point, I can pause for questions.
Thank you very much for that introduction and overview. I'll open it up to our fellow professionals. Victor, interested in your perspective on what Michael said.
I really liked Dr. Michael's comment about being able to bring concepts from track and field into football, and I think with technology, with us being able to measure more various parameters into how athletes move from various sports, we'll be able to sort of bring concepts from more sports than just track and field and into each other. For example, one of the things that makes a difference in baseball, in the success of throwing the ball, is not the speed of the ball, but the spin of the ball, right? And it's something that people understood after measuring, making lots of measurements, etc. This is actually something that they're looking to do now in football, to start looking at things about around ball movement, to detect how much that influences the success of a kick, for example. So my question is, like, what other similar fusions do you see, for example, coming to football from other sports and concepts?
So we've looked at, and it's ongoing now. So the beauty about the Evolution Lab app is that it could be utilized on any sport. So, for example, we're doing work with netball. We're working with a couple of players that are on trial with England. We've worked with a couple of senior England players. But the beauty is that it's not just really about the elite players. It's about getting players from grassroots to elite, and that's the key to what we do. We've looked at basketball, the movement, passing movement. We've even looked at gymnastics in terms of flexibility, mobility. Interesting enough, as I'm really pleased to hear what you're saying. We look at hockey also, because of movement, posture, that sort of thing. Yep.
Somebody told me that posture and positioning is not yet very well understood in football, with it, like, to the degree to which this influences, for example, success on the pitch. Is that true?
So that's brilliant, because so look, when I was at Arsenal, I remember there was a comment made, and it wasn't just Arsenal, but it's football generally. And I remember someone saying to me one day, "Well, Michael, it's pointless you doing all that athletic stuff, because footballers run differently to sprinters." Absolutely. But of course, there's a lack of understanding in terms of the output. So of course, in order to create speed, we have to focus on frequency and range of movement. So stride length and the frequency. But of course, if I can use Raheem, because Raheem, for example, his running technique isn't necessarily the best, but of course he has great frequency. But you look at Mbappe, and that sort of contradicts the view that people commonly held, that, well, you can't have range, because the minute he opens up, he's able to, from his reaction point to his acceleration point, is much quicker, purely because he goes from frequency to range in less than 200th of a second. And so when you understand it like that, then it would make sense. But of course, it's very difficult to articulate that to someone that has been so ingrained in the game, because it's a whole re-educational process. But of course, the best way to do it is through one of the ways, I should say, is through the predictive app, where we go through the whole process. So part of that means that you go into the club and say, well, this is what it is. Let's work with your people. to demonstrate what it's about. So in order to increase your speed, really is about stride length. In order to increase speed, we open up the stride length slightly, okay? Because of course we know that you're not going, especially with boots, we know you're not going to have a 15-foot stride on a football pitch, you know. Although Mbappe does sort of transcend that logic to a degree. So if you currently have a 7-foot stride and you're lightning quick on the pitch, let's say Raheem, for example, what we're saying is let's open it up even by 1 foot or 2 foot. So straight away, you're markedly quicker than most, and without necessarily having a high knee lift in terms of range of movement. So those are some of the things that you know, we can look to do to improve speed. Yeah, those are some of the things we look at the moment. Yeah.
Interesting. Just sorry, another question.
Yeah.
On the predictive model, do you have anything related to brainwave activity at the moment?
Right. So yeah, so that's currently. So we're going to work with the new company in Germany that have these pods, but in terms of brainwave specifically, we don't. Although that is something that I'm looking at. But the thing is, especially with the AI, the deeper you get into it, it throws up so many different variables. As with the football technical, the athletic technical, we needed to get a sum total, an average of the best of everything, and the common factors, we needed to do that. So the first version will be based on a process, a model that's not necessarily complete with the latest, because with AI, every single day, there's something else and something else and something else. So we have to get to a place where actually we're happy with this. It's a standout version. It's ahead of the field. So we're moving with that. But I think in terms of the brainwave, that won't be in the first version. So 3 months down the line, it definitely will be, because there is a diurnal system, a pattern to where the body behaves, and you know, measuring it through the brain.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any other points, perspectives on what Michael has had to say, or Victor's questions, before we move on to the next speaker? Right. Okay, thanks. Victor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rudy. So I'll share my screen. Okay, let me know when
Yes, we can see.
Great. So a bit of background about myself for those who just joined. I have over 20 years in IT and technology. I have a background in computer science. That's my master's degree, as well as my bachelor's. I'm currently working with Chelsea, where I've been working for the past 5 years. I've been doing the role of security manager, and also worked up to the level of head of technology. Working in other industries, I have experience in banking, government, military, and also sports. In terms of interests, I'm really passionate about technology. I work with a number of startups, which I advise. And of course, I love sports. I've been doing a number of sports since I was a kid, including swimming, football, track and field. And eventually I managed to become a world champion in 2008 for beach sprint. So I really like sports, and I hope I can keep up doing sports until a very old age. So today I wanted to talk a bit about the impact of technology on grassroots sports, as I see it from a professional sports club. And you know, feel free to ask me questions about it, or comment, or even disagree if you don't agree. So what is grassroots sports? So I think for me, this idea is really interesting, of what grassroots sports means. Initially, sports were predominantly about community engagement, with minimal reliance on technology. You know, there was basic equipment, and the focus was more on participation than performance, with basic equipment and facilities. Then, with increasing popularity, sports gained started to increase. Clubs became pivotal in nurturing talents and fostering sportsmanship. And at local level, sports usually also mirrored things like societal changes, adapting to shifts in cultural, economic, and political landscapes. So, if we want to think about technology, you can go back all the way to the Roman times, the ancient Olympics, where it was most about the kind of tools that people used in the sports they were performing. So maybe somebody had a fancier chariot, different materials, different techniques to building those instruments they were using for their sports competitions. But I guess if you think about modern technology, things started to change, after the invention of modern shoes, maybe, but more importantly, with the advent of the transistor. So with the advent of transistor, we started to see broadcasting start to show up in the world of sports. And the introduction of radio and later television broadcasting brought grassroots sports to a wider audience, increasing their popularity. And of course, this actually started to make professional sports a lot of what it is today, because that's when small clubs from a city or even a small town started to have increased audience, to the point where now some clubs have world audience, of course. Another element of technology in sports is the basic performance tools. So simple tools like stopwatches and basic fitness equipment starting being used to enhance training. And then in the late 20th century, we started having things like video analysis, and video technology started to play a significant role in coaching and performance analysis, even at amateur level sports. Another important element was the early data use. So basic statistics and performance data started to be used for improving strategies and training methods. But another one that we might touch upon later is the use of data for scouting. And I'm sure maybe a lot of you saw Moneyball, where a very small sports team managed to become really competitive by improving the way they selected the players that they were purchasing. And now this is, of course, widespread, and almost everybody uses it, to the point where it's becoming an arms race in both data and technology. I think it's really interesting if you think about the radio and TV and the kind of impact this brought to sports. It really brought a revolution into the news reporting. It was the first mass medium with the capability of relaying an event to the public as it happened. I think the first broadcast was probably around 1920, if I'm not mistaken. But then it was the newspapers, etc. So if you think about the technology context, there's several ways of looking at it. So first, you have some weaknesses that are specific to maybe not just grassroots sports, but if we're focusing on grassroots sports, is not everybody has a huge infrastructure for technology. There's generally limited resources. We're not talking about similar revenues, revenue streams that big sports organizations have. And another example of a weakness is technological literacy. And that you can look at that from two perspectives. One, just a technical and IT kind of technological literacy, but also it can be the sports and the medical know-how in terms of training methods and modern training methods, right? That are maybe not available to all grassroots sports clubs. Not everybody can afford a very well-established coach or trainer or medical team to help with the training. In terms of opportunities, enhanced training methods are becoming more and more available. the internet has made this easier to reach, and also you have reduced costs of technology. You know, you have more available guides on how to do. You have global connectivity, which gives you access to you know, a coach from the other end of the world that can help individual athletes improve their performance, or at least analyze what they've been doing in their trainings. But we still have a lot of challenges. So as we're getting more better at using data to improve athlete performance, then we started to have concerns about the security of that data. You know, we have the regulations like GDPR, which poses a lot of significant risk. For example, to organization that has limited resources, you wouldn't want to pay GDPR fines and destroy your budget with a loss like that. Of course, the pace of innovation, you know, can be beneficial, but at the same time, if you don't keep up with it, you may easily find yourself losing the race, because there'll be other clubs innovating faster than you are. So if before the competition was strictly about athletic performance, now it's also about innovation in itself, right? Because no matter how many push-ups you can do, like if you don't adopt the latest training methods and the latest technology that they can improve the speed at which you are training, then you might actually lose the race in the end. And of course, there's the issue of resource inequality. You know, technology costs, coaches and staff also cost. So grassroots sports club in London may have more resources than a grassroots sports club in Romania, for example. So that's some things to keep in mind. So we're seeing now the rise of accessible technologies. So if you're talking about grassroots sports, once limited by resource constraints, we're now experiencing unprecedented growth thanks to accessible technology. We are seeing affordable wearable devices and mobile applications, which are enabling local athletes and coaches to track performance metrics. And, you know, this is something that was previously just reserved for elite athletes, because you had to have multiple people with stopwatches, with notebooks to take all these notes. Now it's easy. Each individual athlete can start recording some of these metrics by themselves, including GPS trackers, heart rate monitors. You even have the latest Apple Watch monitoring oxygen levels. Although I heard that they just got banned from doing that, so I'm not sure how that's going to evolve. But you have affordable wearable devices like Fitbit, and you have applications like Strava. This is enabling athletes and coaches to track performance metrics that you know, were never accessible before at this level. And of course, this is helping to enhance training regimes. You can go to a local park or school field and make advanced fitness tracking that you didn't have before. I mentioned earlier about the scouting, and I think it's also helping shift the mindset of scouts and selectors at high levels of sports. There's a growing demand for accurate data and performance analytics. And we're seeing a similar shift now in grassroots sports to a data-centric approach to performance and performance management. There's a lot of tools out there. I think I mentioned Strava. There's also another one, SportsVote. So data analytics and performance, it's kind of now exploding in all sports, not just football, not just track and field, but more and more sports are starting to adopt this. For example, local football teams are using something like Huddle to analyze gameplay, improve strategies. In track and field, you may see something like My Jump help athletes measure and enhance their jump performance. In Olympics, you see things like fitness trackers, GPS trackers, sensors can be mounted now on almost everything. Boxers, for example, have data analytics to analyze opponents' tactics and weaknesses. Even in sailing, you can analyze water currents and use that to improve performance. Another challenge that this brings is the sheer amount of data that all of these sensors are generating. But of course, now you have commercial solutions for cloud, like Google and AWS, that allow even grassroots clubs to easily manage this data. Another really important change that I would say helps grassroots with technology compete more easily with traditional sports organization is the advent of social media and community engagement. So this breaks a couple of important barriers with regards to access to streaming. So before, if a club wanted to stream, you'd be dependent on the national television channels or the local television channels, and you'd be how should I say this, dependent on their programs. So with advent of affordable internet and high definition mobile cameras, this barrier for entry is now significantly lower. You have platforms like SportVote. There's another one called Scene or Stage that is providing options for grassroots clubs to stream their content and their events. You can even introduce paywalls. So, for example, you can have parents or friends of the athletes be able to watch the games. You can introduce a small fee for that, so you can essentially generate an extra streaming, extra revenue stream for the club. This also helps grassroots competitions gain visibility, reach a wider audience, but also boost exposure for up and coming athletes, potentially helping them commercialize the community sports ecosystem. So it's essentially a democratization of broadcasting. You can have not just local reach, but you can have global reach. There's a number of track and field athletes that I'm actually following on some social media channels, and they have an incredible following. Some of them have a greater following than some professional football players that I know. Another important innovation, I'd say it's around virtual and augmented reality. This has a lot of implications, but one of them is around the ability for players to train different things from the safety of the gym, for example, or their houses. Initially, this was very inaccessible. Only big clubs would have access to something like this, because you generally have dedicated development teams that do this sort of platforms as a custom build. But now they're becoming more and more commercially available. So you have both virtual reality and augmented reality. They can be used for a number of things. You can, for example, create and review scenarios. Then players can go and practice newly generated drills. They have the feeling of real life practice. So the coach can recreate the VR scenario in less than 2 minutes. You can also train keepers for reaction training, right? You throw balls at them, see how fast they react, and you also can coach them on how to improve that reaction time. There's actually a debate here around how much VR can contribute to that. I've been discussing with one of the coaches in our technical team, and he says that it's still better to train them in real life, but of course there's other people saying quite the opposite. So I'm not sure yet. You can do, for example, guided stretching sessions. So not everybody can afford a physio guy in the team, so you can do a pre-recorded guided stretching session. Some other athletes use this for situational awareness, and also I've heard about Olympic athletes using it for recreating the noise of the crowds to get them used to the pressure of performing in a crowded arena. Found that really interesting because apparently it has a huge impact on performance during the event day. I actually have a video that I wanted to share with you for one of these apps. Let me know if you can hear the sound.
Yeah, we can see it.
Can you hear the sound?
No sound. You can talk us through it if you want to.
Victor, one of the questions I was going to ask, which is inspired by this video that you have here, you spoke about virtual reality and augmented reality. Is this sort of clip that we're watching a combination of both, where you're able to take virtual reality and then augment it to create a scenario?
Well, augmented reality, I'd say it's more, the way I would use augmented reality is, for example, to give information overlay to somebody watching the game in real time. So, for example, we are considering doing that for our fans, to give them the opportunity to use the phone, look through the phone at the pitch, and then see, for example, the speed at which a certain player is running. So you can potentially use that with the fans and as they're watching the game. Probably an application with the players would be during training, to give them some special glasses that would give them some an information overlay. For example, highlight to them something that they may have missed as they are playing, like, hey, look to your left, you need to pass there, like, or you need to chase that other guy, or this is the speed at which you're running. That's how augmented reality can potentially be used.
So you're kind of describing positional play then.
Potentially, yeah. So I think probably more applications will come as I think the challenge with the augmented reality is the device itself and the wearable. As the wearables become smaller, then you'll start to see more and more applications. Even with VR, that's still one of the challenges it has. It's still quite bulky. It's still dependent on battery. If you want to have really high quality graphics, then you need to be tethered to a performant PC still. There's versions that have everything in the goggles, but they're not so high quality. So as the technology becomes more and more miniaturized, then you'll start to see more and more interesting applications for those.
Okay, Michael, we'd be interested in your thoughts on where Victor's got to, particularly around that last point around VR.
I think it's fascinating. I think Some we've looked at, others we definitely haven't. I'm really excited because I think, look, positionally, that's correct. I had an idea a while back, probably about 20 years ago, but it was more of a mechanical, technical builder. Because again, going back to effective running, range frequency, that was a major problem in terms of teaching people to run quick and efficiently and effectively.
Yeah.
I think now with this augmented reality, instead of having that structured process, this is fantastic because I guess some coaches, I won't say old school, but some coaches would not embrace it, where others would. But I think as you continue to push the boundary, I think it's fascinating, and I think definitely I've heard a number of things here that we'll be having conversations around working together, I guess, to some degree. But yes, it's very good.
So in closing, I think it's really important to keep in mind that this is really opening up a lot of revenue streams for grassroots sports clubs. So I mentioned that the live streaming and advertising. Of course, you have the power of social media now. You can do so much with so little now with social media if you're just a bit creative. You have OTT platforms, so it gives grassroots sports clubs the opportunity to start streaming their content. You don't even need to have a camera crew now, because you can just put a camera with an artificial intelligence there that automatically tracks the ball for you or the athletes, and you can stream that. It almost looks as if it has a production crew behind it. You can add a paywall and you start having a revenue stream. Of course, if you're able to grow this online audience, then you can go into things like data and audience aggregation, and then you can have a better offering for sponsorship. Traditionally, grassroots football clubs were just about placing a brand there. Hey, I like you. You're the town's grassroots club. I'm just gonna put my brand there. Maybe I'm the local bus company, whatever. But now you're actually able to go there and offer them something tangible. You're telling them, hey, this is who's actually watching our games. This is who's actually attending our games. And it's a way clearer value proposition from them, rather than just, hey, we're just supporting the local team. No, you're actually having visibility now with people that matter for you. Crowdsourcing and including content production, that's an interesting one. So all these people attending, they're generating content, and reusing that content is very, very valuable. If you're very smart about how to do this, you can actually tell a story through the posts that people are generating about your club. And lastly, it's online retail. So with things like Shopify, for example, all clubs can now have their own merchandise. You can go to a local artist and you can brand your apparel, and then you can actually make it cool and viral. So that's a couple of ideas about the impact of sports tech.
Thank you very much for that, Victor. Very interesting. I'm going to open it up now to our participants. If you have a particular question or perspective for Victor.
Mike, I've got loads of questions based on what Victor and Mike have said, but I'm going to reserve that until I hear from the next speaker. But the one thing I wanted to ask you, Victor, your role as security, am I right in assuming that includes cyber security as well?
Well, no, so it includes just cybersecurity. Physical security is super different. But I do, for example, I manage the technology strategy now and architecture. So
okay.
It's quite broad, and I essentially work with all the functions in the club now.
Okay, and just the other thing, does it include, with all the technology that's about, and I really thank you for that. It's opened my eyes. What about IP and intellectual property protection? Is that something that's at the forefront of what you guys do when you're embracing this new technology?
Yeah, so any technology that any football organization deploys needs to take into account regulation and things about data protection, IP protection. That's at the core of cybersecurity. Yeah.
I'm more thinking about the risk of infringement.
Well, I guess that's typically managed by legal teams of,
Okay.
of football clubs.
Okay. Look, the only reason I asked that, I mean, we're talking about sports, and I've been into a number of schools, and they talk about being professional sportsmen and women and people, but you know, it's they fail to appreciate that the industry is significantly bigger than just running about and playing. There's a whole infrastructure
Oh yes, absolutely.
that supports that, and it's equally as important because in the process that ASE are doing, you know, when Mike spoke about the red, amber, green, for those who fall into the red, it doesn't mean to say that their involvement in sport is over. And I'd like to think that ASE would help support them through the coaching and mentoring that Roger and I will talk about a little bit later on, in finding value elsewhere within the industry.
Yeah, one really interesting thing that I noticed about me since I started working for a football club was I noticed how my habits of watching a football game changed. Before I never noticed anything behind the advertising boards at the football game, you know, because that's where the pitch ended for me. But now, like, I tend to look more beyond the advertising boards to see, you know, what's happening with the stadium operations, what's happening behind the curtain, how are people moving about, how are things organized, how does the technology look on the stadium. You know, it's a very complex organization, a very complex show that we're putting, and a lot of moving parts. And I find it really interesting when I'm talking to people about, for example, what my role is, because everybody imagines that, you know, Chelsea is just football players, and they don't understand the complexity of, you know, we have so many businesses under the same roof. We have hotels, we have hospitality, we have a medical team, we have 3 football teams, you know, all of them have separate infrastructure, charity. It's very complex.
And if I can come in there, I think it's understanding that within each role there is a complexity, and I mean, Woody and I are going to speak a little later about mentoring, but that is one of the key things that you need to get across to people in terms of them understanding their pathway.
Yeah, thank you for that. Right, before we move on to our next speaker, which will be Mercy, giving us a background. Michael, is there anything that you'd like to add before we move on to Mercy, our next speaker?
No, I'm my mind's in my nutty professor mode at the moment, just thinking and developing, because that's really is, you know, I've already got another year's worth of plans in mind. So, no.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Victor. Enlightening, and we've learned a lot. We really have. Thank you for that. So, Mercy, over to you.
Okay, thank you for having me on the show. I'm Mercy Gilbert, and I'm Vice President of Clapton Football Club. I'm heavily involved in grassroots football, and also I'm recently involved in trying to link football with African countries. And the technologies that was just showcased just now is quite interesting, and I think it will be something that the developing countries would probably benefit from, and because it will be more cost effective, especially the virtual ones, in trying to get different football professionals out there, and the cost of training those people for that. So I can see the future in that in the developed world. When we're discussing grassroots football, I think we try to look at how we're helping the young people, and to keep young people off the crime records and to keep them also fit as well as and mentally, that it's not just about football. I think being a vice president of one of the oldest football clubs in London, that sometimes trying to work together with other communities and engaging with other communities, that it can be quite difficult. So for me, I'd really like to address how we can try to get more funding for grassroots football.
Okay, right. Actually, Mercy, that's a perfect segue into our next section, because we've just been speaking or hearing about the accessibility as it relates to grassroots and the use of technology. This section now, we're going to be talking about civic pride, and particularly as it relates to young people. And what we mean by that in terms of ASE is we talk about inspiring inclusive, peaceful, caring, and enterprising neighbourhoods and local communities. And when it comes to young people, we also focus on the importance of 3 key pillars, in that young people need somewhere to go, young people need something to do, and young people need someone to show them how. And within the program of activities, we have a program called Passing the Baton Legacy, which we're going to hear about from Jerome a bit later on. We look at the values of respect and inclusion are the common ground for all, regardless of background, culture, or status. And we think about the attitudes, aspirations, and attainments. And that's why the mentoring side, and Michael really touched on it earlier on as well, the mentoring side to our activities are really important, because that talent pipeline is about grassroots from our neighborhoods. And these are global neighborhoods, you know, doesn't matter where you live on this earth, we all live in neighborhoods of some sorts. So again, it's how we provide support for the mental well-being and the progression, both on and off the field as well. So on this section now, I'm going to ask Roger to start, then Woody, then we'll come to Jerome. Thank you, Roger.
Yeah, thank you, Rudy. I think we've heard a lot already about how people can get involved, but there needs to be some discussion about how young people access it and how young people understand what they're getting into. So, for example, a young person could have a dream, they want to be a footballer, but they see themselves on that screen that they watch every Saturday evening. But it's about how they engage with that process, and it can be pretty daunting for them. And I think the role of the mentor is to hear what they've got to say first. So what do they want to achieve? But then also have a discussion with them so that they understand the pathway. And that can be quite challenging, because it can be quite different to what they expected or what they anticipated. But you've kind of got to put them in the middle of it so that they can see how it all works, how it all becomes tangible. I've mentioned to people before that, you know, when I was a young man, I was fortunate enough to be mentored. And I, at the time, wanted to be a professional cricketer, and understanding that and negotiating that landscape was difficult, because there were challenges. And understanding when you aggressively go forward or take a breath was something I had to learn. And I learned that through people who were mentors. And then when I stepped out of that field and started to look for employment, I was fortunate enough to be mentored by two individuals who, one, made sure that I got through uni and finished what I was doing at uni. But secondly, they helped me to have the focus in terms of where it is that I could go, not where I thought I was going to go. And that was really important. I think that when I listened to Victor and Michael and they describe what it is that they do, I think that there's a whole spectrum of events that people could be engaged with, young people could be engaged with. I'm really, really interested in what Jerome has to say about this, because from a younger perspective, I think it's important that their voice is heard. And in many ways, for me, that is the role of the mentor. The mentor, in many ways, needs to go ahead of the young person and almost clear the way for them to progress. So that's my feelings. And I found a lot of the information that has been discussed in the 45 minutes or whatever it is that we've been live has been absolutely amazing. But all the time I keep asking, how accessible is it? You know, the wearable tech that Victor spoke about, I wonder how accessible all of that is. Where do you start in terms of grassroots? And those are the sort of links and discussions that people need to have with mentors.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anything anybody would like to ask Roger on that, or perspective on what he said before we go to Woody? Okay, Woody, over to you.
Okay.
You're on mute.
So my fingers are just so fast, I thought I'd double click. I was really fascinated to hear the discourse from Victor and Mike, and the level of technology applied in sport. As I mentioned earlier, and Victor, you'd relate to this. I work for a very large multinational companies on the cutting edge of technology, a lot of military applications. And I actually work with rocket scientists as well. And in the 40 years I've been doing this, and some of you, Roger, you'll be the same. We've seen this advancement in technology and how technology is applied to the workspace, and the leaps is staggering in our very short lifetime. But the one thing I didn't hear about, that sort of tangible technological advancement, is nobody's talking about the technology of the mind. You know, we have systems now that do not need the intervention of a human being. You have drones that can fly themselves. You have lots of robotics and lots of things where that's completely automated and programmed, but there's still that human intervention. And I'm just thinking about, you know, when we talk about this technology, if there's the same energy that's being given in the, and I won't call it the advancements in mind technology, because all we're doing is remembering things that used to be done dozens and dozens of years ago. You get on the internet and you type in technology of the mind, there are literally hundreds of thousands of books, which makes me believe, well, there might be just something in that we've lost, and we need to start paying attention to. And those of us in, you know, working in those big organizations, the language that is being used now, you spoke about that years ago, and people just look at you and call you things like tree huggers or soft. But everybody's now using that, and there's an evolution of understanding and giving attention to our mental state, our mental energy. Energy crops up a lot in discussions in industry now. And when I coach people and I talk to people, the first thing I say to them, as soon as they mention the word energy, I say, what does that mean? And you give them the opportunity for their 90-second elevator speech, and they can't describe it. Now, I always say, well, if you can't describe it, you don't know what it is. So have a think about that, because once you have an awareness of it, you start to operate differently. Now, that's where I feel the mentoring and the coaching comes in. And let me tell you how I got into mentoring and my absolute love and passion of people. Indulge me. Maybe about 7, 8 years, I'm wandering to the laundry with my sister and my brother. And my sister carrying 2 heavy laundry bags. She leans on the door and knocks over a little old white lady. She makes a comment of the sort that wouldn't be tolerated today. I remember thinking, what the hell's all that about? She doesn't even know us. Why would she say something like that? And it bothered me all the way through the wash cycle. I'm sat there watching the washing whirl around in the tumble dryer. And I come to the realization, well, maybe something happened to her or somebody that she cares about that's created this attitude. And I said to myself, from now on, whenever I interact with somebody, it has to be of value to both them and to myself. I have to be representative, not as a black person, but just as a human being. And that was okay. I lived by that for some 35 years. That was a program I'd given myself. But here's how the mind works. Now, I told you I work for a big corporate environment. Now, whichever way you look at that vision I set for myself, it's wanting to be liked. It's wanting to be liked. Now, Victor, if I'm cutting along to Chelsea and I've got to negotiate a pretty serious deal with you, and we're at odds with regards where we want to be, and I have to use some harsh language, there may well be that in the back of my mind, where I'm wanting to be liked, I may not get my point across. And the point that I'm trying to make is the conditioning and programs that we pick up in life needs constant re-evaluation to make sure that they're working for us. Because it may well be that you have some values that you abide by, but there are aspects of your life that isn't working because these values are pulling you down. And once you have a consciousness of them, you're able to do something about it. And that's where the coaching and the mentoring comes into play. The whole idea of coaching and mentoring is to help people identify what their issues are. What I like about what we're doing at the grassroots level, we're giving that coaching and mentoring opportunities to individuals who may not necessarily get access to it. They may not have the ability to tap into it. I didn't tap into it till I was about 40. And that's when I had a real understanding of life itself. And if I wouldn't change anything, but the one thing I'd seek is identifying with a coach or mentor, because once you do that, it's not just a benefit to the individual, but it's a benefit to everybody that individual comes into contact with or is able to influence if you do it correctly. And with sportsmen and people, they have the opportunity to tap into vast audiences. They're able to influence vast numbers of people. So provided we get their state right, they'll do what life expects them to do and bring people along with them on their journey. And in the words of Forrest Gump, that's all I've got to say about that.
Thank you for that, Mike. Is there any perspectives before we move on to Jerome?
Yeah, I want to add to this. I remember a long time ago, I don't know if any of you remember the movie called The Mask of Zorro.
Mm-hmm.
In The Mask of Zorro, there was Anthony Hopkins, and one of the quotes he had was something along the lines of, "When the student is ready, the master will appear."
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really understand it back then, but I know, like, when I left Romania in 2016, I felt like I reached the point where my evolution sort of stopped. You know, it was a bit after finishing my uni, my master's, and you know, after you finish the standardized education, then you come to a point where nobody pushes you to self-develop, and you sort of have to make your own decisions. And until you sort of really grasp that, you're really struggling mentally, emotionally. You know, at one point, your sort of inner self starts to tell you, hey, something, you need to choose a direction. And it took me a lot of years to realize that I was actually seeking a mentor, a coach, or stuff. And it wasn't obvious. If somebody had told me before I came here that I should have seek coaching or mentoring, I would be very aggressive about it. I say, what do you mean? I don't need anybody to tell me what to do. You know, but it's something that you kind of gradually discover. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think anybody can explain to you that you need a mentor until you reach the point where you actually need it and you're ready to listen to somebody. It will not happen. And so I guess I'm at the point where I'm 100% sure that I need a mentor. I'm just trying to find the right mentors or the right mentors around me, and that's the challenge now.
Absolutely, we've been there and we're still there. Thank you.
I'm very excited about what Jerome is doing. Really excited about that.
Yes.
Right. Jerome, just before you start, Michael, is there anything that you want to say? Because I think that's really important, the mentorship relation.
I think that look, mentoring is important. I do agree with Victor, actually. I was a stage further than he was. I was told you need a mentor, and yes, the violence in my tone, in the tone of my voice, is echoed by what he said. So, but look, the reality of life is that we do need mentors. It is important. But again, you know, when will that mentor appear? And so, with that being said, yes, Jerome.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to my amazing dad for giving me the knowledge and the wisdom. This one's a bit of a touchy one for me because of lived experiences and being younger. So first and foremost, unfortunately, I was a victim of knife crime at my younger stages, and for me, it enabled me to lose myself as an individual. I didn't know who I was anymore. I lost my true identity. Being somebody like my dad that is able to do so many different things, like I sing, I act, do modeling, fashion, and I always tap into my creative side. But when you have a mental block, when you go through such a traumatic experience, you're not able to navigate and drive forward. You always feel stuck, and it's always about the mental state of mind. The mental state of mind is the most powerful asset that we have. If you are not in control of your mind will control you and lead you into no man's land. And for me, it's always about purpose. With no sense of purpose, you have no sense of direction. But when you are going through such a traumatic experience and you haven't dealt with that, you're literally running into a brick wall. And I kid you not, I lost out probably 15 years of my life being paranoid, being scared, sleeping actually with a knife under my pillow, trying to jump out of the window, panic attacks, sweats, paranoia, not being able to trust anybody. And sometimes we always go around saying, I'm not a bad person, I'm not a bad person, and believe I'm not a bad person. But sometimes it's not always about the fact of not being a person or being a person. It's about understanding yourself. When you lose sense of yourself, I'm telling you, it is not the best feeling. I actually did end up getting diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, which is quite common when people go through traumatic experiences. As a young black boy living in London, it always has been hard. But what separates me from the rest well, I know that I have unique talents about me. I have a good mind on myself with knowledge and wisdom. And for that reason, last year, I thought, you know what? I've lost out 15 years of my life. And I just feel like something's blocking me. Something is holding me from catapulting to where I need to be. Going back a little bit, I was a footballer. I was the first footballer my dad was talking about. I was playing for Tottenham, but unfortunately, I went on a motorbike, messed up my leg, and didn't go back. But my younger brothers took charge of that. I even got involved in netball myself, did basketball. I did so many different things, but I always looked at the identification of the creativity of it and how I can excel. And like my dad always says, if you are going to do something, be the best at what you do, and have your own identity. So for now, what I try and tell the youth now, because I have become a mentor now, and a motivational speaker. Last year, I gave myself to God, and it was the best thing for me, being reborn again, because I felt that I needed to do that to lift the weight off my shoulder, give myself to Christ, and follow that pathway. And a year gone, and I feel amazing. I feel amazing. But the main thing that I needed to do was have a reset. I had to have a reset. I had to wash away a lot of people that were in my life, a lot of so-called friends, and make a lot of sacrifices. And your everyday living actually channels through your habits and the things that you value every single day, the things that you do. So now what I teach these kids is, first and foremost, what do you like to do? So I'll ask each one of them separately, what is it you like to do? Some of them don't have an understanding what they want to do, and some of them do say the same thing what their friend says, or some of them have a speciality. So it's always good to identify what all of these kids like to do, because they are quite young, but it's installing positivity and endurance in them from a young age. Because in the society that we live in now, it's crazy. The stabbings that are going on now is horrific. Now, the times when I was involved in a gang, it was so much of these people were walking around with flick knives. Now these kids are walking around with swords, and it is scaring me. Not only because it brings back memories, but it's just a fact. I'm somebody that has children. I've got a family. I'm walking around. I could be going to the supermarket, and it's not always people that people are after. It's always sometimes mistaken identity, being caught up in a crossfire. Unfortunately, but fortunately, social media is such a great thing if looked at in the right way. I utilize my social media to market myself, my singing, my motivation, my mentoring. A lot of these young boys are seeing certain things and glorifying it and thinking it's okay. And unfortunately, one thing that I believe isn't good is the type of music they listen to, which they call drill music, which is glorifying stabbings, glorifying doing so much erratic things. But sometimes half of these boys don't even pan out to go and kill people. It's just part of, okay, I just want stripes, I just want this. They have forgotten about their own identity, and sometimes the streets is their family. This is what it is. So they think that they've got to impress their friends, but some of them are going back home acting like a good boy because they've got their mum and dad to look to. But another main key thing that I wanted to identify is sometimes what I want to now start doing, now being an ambassador, is talking about stemming from finding the root of the problem with the younger generation, and being able to identify what the issues may be before it gets to such a crucial point, and giving them a chance. And it's all about love and nurturing and understanding them and making them fulfill their purpose. Because like I said, without purpose, there's no sense of direction. So as a mentor, it's all about shedding light and positivity on the younger generation and giving them an understanding about the world and society out there. So, and having a lived experience is always sometimes good, because you're able to let them know what you went through, let them know that it's not good, and let them know that there is hope for them out there. And having an understanding what they want to do, not what your friends want to do, and navigating and accelerating and driving forward. Consistency consistency is key. And that is one of the main things for me, staying disciplined and staying consistent with what your purpose may be. So yeah.
Thank you for that. The lived experience is important. So just before we come to the end of this dialogue, it's been really good, that blend between technology and the obvious focus on human development. So Michael, I'm going to come to you and for you just to give us a quick overall summary. And of course, I should also mention the fact that we do have the Academy of Sporting Excellence event next week over at the Lee Valley Athletics Centre. And this is with the focus around sustainability. So what we've been able to do is identify key pillars that reflect the dedication to a holistic approach. We've touched on that this evening. Environmental education, that's essential. We'll be working in collaboration with Enfield Climate Action Forum. Again, they have a program called Health Climate Action. So it thinks about young people in their neighbourhoods, the local community, the environment, the physical exercise, the health, and the healthy living, which is an important part. Inclusive talent identification. And of course, Michael, you touched on that. Again, you've had the lived experience when it comes to inclusive talent identification. So we're talking about girls and boys, men and women across all sports. Mental health and well-being, an integral part. You know, we've touched on it. It's about the mind and, you know, being positive, focusing around attitude, aspirations, attainment. And then finally, social responsibility. Again, that's important to our approach. And of course, as was mentioned in the very beginning, there is a sports ecosystem. And it's important that we help to get that message across with our proposed performance centre, our expo events, and then I think that we will make our contribution in that way to local and global communities. So Michael, last word with you before we close.
I just want to first of all thank everybody for making this possible, Rudy, especially. Look, I think it's been fascinating for me. You know, there was this saying, I'm not sure the movie, but every day is a school day. It's one of learning, it's one of progression. You know, and for me, it's exciting and outstanding in a sense that, you know, many years ago, I looked to help young people. And again, that was born out of personal circumstances. Of course, Jerome mentioned and you know, to the point of his situations and so on. So as a parent, as any parent, you know, it was tough to deal with because, of course, on 2 occasions, he was prescribed as dead. So for me, there was always a need to ensure that other parents would not go through this. And I think what this situation has been able to do is through, you know, our program Grassroots to Elite. Jerome's point was, look, let's look at identifying the root cause, and of course, the key area that brings everyone together is sport. So I guess that's always been a driving passion for me, in a sense, to ensure that, you know, we could engage and involve as many young people as possible. It's not easy. There's a challenge. Everybody has a story. But I think what I've been able to find now is that through health, education, and sport, you merge these 3 together. And I think we've got something that's outstanding, coupled with the people that we engage with every day. I think the future is bright. So again, just thank everybody. It's not a religious thing, but without bias, my Lord and Savior, you know, I believe fully in that. And so I move forward and I lead my life on that basis. So thank you guys again.
Thank you very much, everyone, and good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night. Thank you all.